There we go. All right. So this is the, I guess, quick workshop on the employment skills contest. And one of the things I wanted to do for this one is there's not a lot of I hate it when people just give me paper, because Lord knows if it even makes it back to school for me. And so nice thing is this is going to be recorded, and I'm hopelessly addicted to podcasts. And so I was going to try and set this up podcast style. And so we're pretty lucky right now. Give you a tiny little background on myself with this contest. I've been very, very fortunate to have some awesome kids come through. I think this year is going to be the 8th kid I've had go to nationals in this contest. I've had 2 national winners, a 2nd place, a 3rd place, and Jordan, who's joining us at Yelm, was 4th place in this contest at nationals too. So she's actually going to be the star of this show. And we're going to kind of set it up that way. If people have questions along the way, please feel free to ask away. But I'm trying to focus on things that are not the interview. Okay, because a lot of people feel like, it's all about the interview, but there's all those little pieces that are above and beyond. So I guess we'll just get going. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. So I'll introduce, this is Jordan Hummel. Obviously went to Yelm and then WSU, and now we hired her to come back to Yelm. So that's right. Okay. So we'll start right off. The very first question I have, and some of these things came up yesterday too, but we'll start with this. So even though it's unscored, why do you feel like the job description is important?
For me, the job description, and I scored all of the state paperwork this year. So if you had a kid go to state, I scored their paperwork. I could not tell you what any of them were because that was like 36 job applications that I went through. I think it's important because it lets the judges know exactly what the kids should be interviewing for. So kind of reading between the lines of, okay, well, they're supposed to be doing this job. So what experiences should they have that shows you that they're qualified to do that? And yes, it is unscored, but like I said, it gives you that background information. And when you find it, when you create this job description, it lets you know how you should be coaching that kid to answer those questions. What things should you be highlighting? What, skills, what abilities, what experiences should they be talking about in their interview to show that they're capable of doing all of those things outlined.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah, it sets a stage mentally for who's listening, who's reading, those types of things. All right. I know this came up yesterday, but a common thing I hear from every contestant, including you, is that the application was awkward. What are your thoughts on the application, number one? And then how do you make that application worthwhile when it is awkward and vague?
Yeah, it sucks, quite frankly. I don't know if any of you have ever looked at it or tried to fill one out, but it's the bare bones of an application where you really have no room to put literally any information in. So the one thing I was looking for as I was grading the ones from state this year, and as I did it in high school, is how can I write these experiences to show that I'm qualified for the job? And I think that was one of my biggest comments to kids on that paperwork was, this doesn't really highlight you for the position. Like your job at Walmart does not really show that you're qualified to work in a greenhouse just because you haven't worded it the right way. And so the biggest thing for me doing this contest is making sure, for one, you're wording things so that you're concise and that it all fits in the small application that you get, but also so that it does highlight the candidate without explicitly saying, I am qualified for this position with those experiences and those skills that they've gained.
Yes, and I know that as a group, one of the suggestions that we're giving back to the state committee is that they need to look at a different application and something that gives kids the opportunity to, expand their skills, because it is so vague. Most job applications are not that vague. And so even at the national level, it's, I don't know, it's a jot form and it's pretty awkward because you're submitting what you've typed in there, and it's like running clear over here, and then it starts and it's like, what does it look like when they read it? And you don't know. And so it seems to be one of those components that's awkward all the way through. Okay, so next thing is that follow-up correspondence. I know that a lot of us, we're so used in education to like saying, all right, here's what you have to do to get an A. Here are all the right answers. And if you go in there and you do these things, you'll score perfectly. Well, this contest is so subjective. It depends on the judge. It depends on really the day and how you portray yourself and everything. And so that follow-up letter is not one of those. And there's not a standard form for it. And there's so many different varieties. So my question for Jordan is, what do you think is the most important thing about a quality follow-up letter?
Well, I mean, obviously with anything in this contest, make sure you hit all the points. One of the biggest things I think I did with mounts was go through those rubrics with a fine-tooth comb multiple times, and it was very painful by the end of it. But make sure that you're hitting all of the points that it wants. And one thing that I worked with my kid during student teaching is kind of figure out a baseline. So you never know what kind of follow-up correspondence you're going to get before you get in there. It could be an actual written note, it could be like a full-on letter, it could be an email. Start writing them out and get an idea in your head beforehand of, okay, what do I want to include in this? And obviously some things you can expand and elaborate more than others. But I always like to do the introduction, like, thank you so much for interviewing with me, etc. Bring up something from the interview, tie it back in, reiterate your qualities. And again, kind of like with the application and the job description, show why you're qualified for this job. Why do you want the job? That's what they're looking for, really. So yeah, follow-up correspondence is weird too.
Right. I mean, it's a sales pitch, you're trying to sell yourself. And one thing that I've noticed with this contest too is I compare it to probably the swine industry. That pendulum is just like constantly going back and forth, back and forth. And so, it's at 2014, I think it was 2014, maybe it wasn't that long ago. I had a girl who went back and won at nationals, and a bunch of stuff we used at that, I don't want to say is trash now, but it's outdated and it's old and it doesn't work anymore. And getting lots of different eyes and people who are, current in trends and whatnot to look at things, and having open ears and knowing where to sift through the thank you for your opinion, but, and oh shoot, I hadn't thought of that, knowing how to sift through those things is really important to stay on top. All right. So we're lucky to have Jordan here, like I've said already, and Jordan has got to go through all of the practicums, at both the state and the national level, which not very many kids get to do. A ton, when we go back to nationals, I bet you 90% of the states say all we did was the interview, paperwork, and follow-up letter. And that's all they did. And so when they get back to nationals, they've never gone through any of the practicums, the telephone, the networking, and all that. And so only the top 12 individuals at nationals get to do those. And so not a lot of kids have got to go through them. And I think that's why there's a lot of vagueness on this. So with that being said, what is something you picked up from, let's just start with networking and then we'll do like telephone job offers. So, those types of practicums, maybe explain what you had to do at nationals for your networking activity, which changes every year. It's something different every year.
I would just like to put a disclaimer. I hate networking. I still hate it. It is the most awkward and painful thing I've ever done in my entire life. He had a tough time coaching me because I just didn't want to do it, but I did it. So there's that. At nationals, they had their huge like vendor show. And what they did is, someone, leads you around through all these different places, and you have different little checkpoints where you have to stop and wait for the person ahead of you. What we ended up doing is there was two people at a table, and essentially they walked me close and said, here you go. And I was like, sounds good. So kind of ran through the process. Basically, you ran into someone at this vendor show and started talking with them. And then you have to make those connections, which is the part I hated the most. and kind of work through it that way, make those connections, talk about the job you're applying for without it being, hi, I'm applying for this job, please hire me. Like, you don't want to do that in a networking thing. And I found that real life networking, if kids are good at talking to other people they don't know, this part of the contest is a lot easier. I've gotten better with talking to other people as I've gotten older, obviously, I would hope. But I don't have a ton of advice for this. Like I said, I absolutely hated it.
So when you're quote unquote networking, just speaking loud enough, I know you're right here, but other people. So when you are like, go up and talk to these people, how do you even start a hi, I'm this person? And what do you intro for like a conversation that doesn't say, hey, I love this job, hire me? So give me an example, like what'd you do?
I mean, this was 4 years ago, so I tried to block that out as much as I could, to be honest with you.
Let it flow in.
I'm trying.
I can
Yeah.
I can help you out a little bit, because like based off in the past, like for them, I thought it was really hard, because those of you who've been to nationals have been to the vendor show. They had to do that component while there were 50,000 people in there going past them, you know, doing this and that. With Callie, she had to, they took her to a restaurant and said, all right, you know, your judge will be in there, you'll find it. And as she's walking through that restaurant, there was like a teepee on the tent that said so-and-so from this. And she had to take the initiative to be like, you know, hi, Elaine, you know, and hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm really interested in your company, you know, and just, you had to be that self-motivator, and you had to push that issue. If you have a kid who's like, you know, hesitant and all that, they get eaten alive in that component. They did it with Abby 2 years ago. They did what they called speed networking. And you went into a room and it was just table to table, and it was time. And if you didn't hit all those components on the rubric, and I think it was like less than 2 minutes each one, you had to try and hit all those. And like every kid who's ever gone through there, well, Callie said that she felt like hers was really good. That was her strength, her strong suit. But both Jordan and Abby came out of it like, I screwed that one up. I blew that big time, just because they did make it hard. I've also heard they've done it where they told them to go basically get a coffee and down the road at this, it was just 2 stores down from the hotel, and boom, there was somebody there, and you had to do that, or get in an elevator and you had the elevator ride up and down to try and network with them. And so that's one thing I think we could do a better job at the state level with, is trying to create better scenarios with that.
Yeah. And I think my biggest advice is practice those awkward scenarios with your kids who do this contest. Lord knows Mounts did enough with me, and I still hated it, but at least I had an idea of what to expect when I got in there.
And as many different situations as you can. I mean, lately my golden ticket to create an awkward scenario for my kids is my 10-year-old daughter. She gobbles this stuff up, and I'll say, hey, I've got an interview set up with you with the really important person today. And my student will come in, and my daughter's sitting there ready to go. And they're like, oh, you know, and they say they hate that, but it's good for them. It's good for her too. But how about the telephone job offer?
Telephone job offer is interesting because not only do they offer you the job, you also have to negotiate a specific part of what they're offering you while you're on the phone during that meeting. And so thinking about it now, you have to sit down and look at what your job entails. And you don't want to necessarily just do the stereotypical pay, like, oh, I want more money, I want more hours, things like that. Because realistically, these are high school students. You're not going to negotiate a full-time job for a 16-year-old. But go through and find those interesting details. You know, if you're doing maybe some outside labor, like negotiate having uniforms or a stipend for clothing or things like that. And just think of kind of off the wall things to negotiate that maybe not everyone would think of, because it might make it easier because the judge on the other end isn't thinking about that. So they might be a little nicer when they negotiate with you, but also gives them something to remember you by, because you either want to be first, last, or the best. So.
Do you have any idea how they would take like a religious thing? So like, I can't work before school because I have seminary. Do you have any idea how they would?
If they did it confidently,
Yeah.
I think it'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so,
And that's
I
the key,
mean,
do it
to be,
confidently.
and also to be honest, and maybe some people won't like this comment at all.
Okay.
I think back at nationals, it's gonna go over way better than here in Washington.
Fair enough.
That's for sure.
Yeah,
We have a big Mormon base and I get to
Oh,
say
yeah.
every Wednesday
Yeah.
night I need
Yeah.
out for church.
so,
So that makes it-
so we've got 4 minutes left before the next person has to use this Zoom link. So we actually got to the last question I have here. In your opinion, what characteristics separate top individuals from the rest of the contestants?
I think it's a passion for what they're actually doing. Like, obviously, I'm now an ag teacher. My job was really related to ag education, but in like an extension agritourism way. So it was really easy for me to talk about why I want the job, what my experiences are, how I've prepared myself for it, because I had the ag experience, I had the leadership, I had kind of the teaching experience with what I did in high school. So finding a job that really suits your student and also kind of ties into what they want to continue doing. And I know that watching like sub-district and district contests, I can tell the kids who want to go into the field that they're applying for. Just because they speak so much more confidently and so much more eloquently about what they're saying and about the job they're applying for. I'm like, oh yeah, this is where this kid wants to go. So I think that's a really big thing. And then just confidence. Like, you're gonna have students with a lot of different personality types. And I know I'm a lot more reserved than a lot of the kids Mounts has coached for this contest, and I still made it to the national level, which I was not expecting. Just because when you think of this contest, you think of those really outspoken, really bubbly, really extroverted students who know how to talk to people. It just takes a little more time and effort to coach those other kids like I was. Mounts can tell you a lot of stories about how I was when I was a child. But just that confidence in yourself and knowing how to portray yourself in the best way, because every kid's going to be a little different in that aspect.
Right. And I mentioned it yesterday for the people that were at the table who asked, so this is super advanced, but you have to get a feel for the judging panel and who they are and kind of, fine tune things up, down, if you were that bubbly cheerleader personality and you had 3 very stern males in there judging you, you need to tone it down. Or you have, 3 upbeat, constantly laughing individuals in there, well, you could probably get away with tuning it up and just being able to calibrate and adjust yourself. It takes time and it takes a lot of confidence to be able to do that. Because so many kids are going into it like so worried about just making sure their words are right. And, so you've got to get past that point of worrying about your words and get to that point of confidence that, I got this and I'm confident in what I say and what I have to say matters.
Jordan, what job did you apply for?
I applied for a farm tour coordinator position for a little agritourism business in Yelm.
And did you write the job description yourself, or is it one that you found and then modified?
Yeah, we wrote it ourselves. And so it was, we wrote it ourselves. So like I could write out in the right way how the job fit my experiences.
Yep.
And one thing I think that our kids struggle with a lot is the tell me about yourself, because they kind of go all
yeah.
over. And do you have any tips for that part? Like, that's kind of the opening.
I mean, I always did mine the very traditional, hi, my name is Jordan Hummel. I'm 21 years old and I blah, 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 whatever. I think it is awkward. It is painful.
Was any part not awkward?
No,
Yeah.
all of it was awkward, but I loved it at the same time. I think just finding something that works for your kid, whether that ties more into the academics or, the things that they really enjoy doing, finding some way to communicate something about yourself that isn't necessarily listed on your resume is really good too, because then that gives those interviewers a little better idea of who you are. And then even like relating it back to what you want to continue doing in the future. I don't know if that answered your question at all, but.
As those of you at home, I have to end this so the next person can start we're sharing Zoom links, so I'm gonna end this and then we'll continue answering things in here. Thank you for joining us.